We also abandon old words, okay? If, again, talking about technology, if you think about all of the ways that technology has changed, we've done away with some things. For example, a floppy disk. Some of you might not even know what that is. But a floppy disk used to be, for lack of a better, a thumb drive or a USB drive. I think that's what you call it. Okay, so we don't use floppy disks anymore. So that word is dying or dead. I don't know if that's used for anything anymore. Okay, and that's from an older generation. Then we have words that kind of change based off of where you are in society. Okay. There is, if you're familiar with the term code switching, okay, some things mean some things in some cultures and they mean other things in other cultures. They mean some things in one group of people and then they mean other things in another group of people. So they kind of shift and change, and a lot of times things from pop culture kind of will do their own thing and then they'll seep into mainstream culture. So language is very fluid and it's interconnected. It's also separate because you do have different cultures that are creating their own vibes. All right. That leads me to the mixing of cultures. I'm from Miami, Florida. There are so many different people in Miami from so many different parts of the world. And because of that, you have this mashup of culture and you have a mashup of language. We all kind of borrow from each other. To this day, I call sandals chancletas because a lot of my friends are Cuban and that's what they call their sandals. And it's a fun word for me, so I picked it up and I noticed a lot of people use it, okay? If I use that word in Alabama, unless people are Spanish, they're literally like, what? And even I noticed some Spanish people, they're like, no, we don't use that word like that. But in Miami, that's how we use it. New words to express new ideas, okay? That is, again, very much influenced by technology. It's also influenced by what's going on in the political realm. It's just influenced by what's going on in society. And when we think about progression in society, people are often trying to wrap their minds around what's going on in our current world. And you'll see people write articles and write blogs and write and make podcasts and things like that to kind of discuss what's going on in the world. From those things, new ideas are created, new ways of seeing the world, new ways of thinking of the world, and new ways of changing it for the better. So these are just some of the ways that language changes over time. Okay, so this is kind of a side note of the verbal lecture. I want you to be aware of this and use linguistic sensitivity when you are giving your speeches. So I want you to keep in mind 3 things: jargon, slang, and general language. So jargon is basically that technical verbiage that you use when you are at work, or if you play a sport, when you're with your sports members or your team members, I should say, if you work in any kind of particular type of field that has particular types of words for particular types of occasions, all right? If you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, if you are, actually even teachers have their own slang, or I should say jargon, that they use when they're at work, because we like to shorten things and we like to make things more practical to say on an everyday basis. So technical terms only understood by the select group of people who share that activity interest. Stay away from those things. If you do use them in your speech, be prepared to explain away, okay? If you want to use them, if it's beneficial for you to use them during your speech, that's great. But remember that the general public may not understand, so you have to explain. Slang. One of the most used language out there, but also one of the most specific language used, okay? Which means it's specific to a certain group, all right? It's informal vocabulary developed and used by particular groups in society. Slang is typically used to bind a certain group of people together, okay? Now, when you use slang in the right way and you bind people together, no matter what you do, you're also pushing people out, okay? So if you think of, if you're a part of any kind of culture that has its own particular kind of slang, then you understand that when you speak that language with that group of people in public, the rest of the universe kind of feels left out, okay? You can understand that if you are Hispanic. You can understand that really if you speak any other language in the United States. You can understand that if you are from a particular kind of language or culture within the United States, because you know every culture has subcultures. So you kind of understand that when you speak to that particular group of people using slang in public, you are also pushing people out, okay? I'm from a Jamaican family and I was born in the United States. And I don't know if this is a term that is used all over the country, but I know in South Florida the term Jamaican is used. And Jamaicans actually have their own separate language from Jamaicans and from Americans, because it is kind of its own culture. Jamaicans understand that they are kind of split between two cultures. And because of that, they had to kind of create some language that would pull them in, draw them in together, and help them form bonds. But when you do that, you also push people out. Just important to know when you're giving a public speech. Lastly, general language. That's that language that is very iffy to use just because some people care and some people don't care, okay? You could have a mailman that's a woman that you call a mailman, and she may be offended by the fact that you called her a mailman because she's a woman, okay? So just be mindful of those terms. You never know who you're going to offend, and to be honest with you, even when you adhere to these things, you still could probably offend somebody, because offense is not something that's easy to avoid, and offense is not always easy to predict. So you just kind of have to do your best. In general, think about these things and you should be fine.